Hello, it's Thursday the 15th of March. I am Malcolm Massey, and this is the UK Column News. David Cameron is in the United States visiting his special friend, President Obama. Speaking yesterday, Cameron praised President Obama's strength, moral authority and wisdom as the pair fawned over their special relationship. The main focus of the visit was for the drive for World War, with discussion of Afghanistan, Syria and Iran. In a press conference afterwards, Cameron said the mission in Afghanistan was entering its final phases. It is not surprising that Cameron would make such a comment, as the operation in Afghanistan is clearly coming undone, and the Anglo-American war machine gears up for Syria, Iran and Russia. That any attack on Iran would likely escalate into a war with Russia was highlighted in an article in the New York Times on the 11th of March. The newspaper's Pentagon correspondent, Elizabeth Bullmiller, wrote that senior Pentagon officials told her that any attack by the US on Syria has the potential for starting a proxy war with Iran or Russia, two crucial allies of Syria. But first they have to get out of Afghanistan. The situation there goes from bad to worse following the massacre of 16 Afghanis, including women and children, by one or more American soldiers. The massacre is already having a catalyzing effect in Afghanistan, with the Taliban suspending talks with the US and calls from President Karzai for American troops to be withdrawn from Afghan villages and rural areas. The questions over who exactly was involved in the massacre and whether or not it was one or more gunmen are still unanswered. The name of the single serviceman so far accused of having been involved is still unknown, and he seems to have been spirited out of Afghanistan before any formal identification could take place by Afghani authorities. This all seems to hint towards this atrocity being some kind of false flag, an event designed to cause a specific reaction amongst Afghan officials and the Taliban which will give the US and Britain an excuse to leave. That, combined with the newly reinvigorated special relationship between Obama and Cameron, which seems to bear many of the features of the special relationship between Bush and Blair, seems to us at least to indicate an imminent change in the theatre of operations. The Russian press reported on Monday that Hillary Clinton told her Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov, that Iran has one last chance to come to the table for talks. If Iran does not comply, an attack will happen within months. The Russian media believes an attack will come before the end of 2012. Yesterday, during his press conference with David Cameron, President Obama made it clear that the message delivered to Lavrov was in fact from him.
And I have sent a message very directly to them publicly that they need to seize this opportunity of negotiations with the P5+1 to avert even worse consequences for Iran in the future. Do I have a guarantee that Iran will walk through this door that we're offering them? No. In the past, there's been a tendency for Iran in these negotiations with the P5+1 to delay, to stall, to do a lot of talking, but not actually move the ball forward. I think they should understand that because the international community has applied so many sanctions, because we have employed so many of the options that are available to us to persuade Iran to take a different course, that the window for solving this issue diplomatically is shrinking.
However, President Obama has been put on notice that his presumption of ownership of the United States military is a dangerous one to hold. Republican Congressional Representative Walter Jones issued a statement on Tuesday discussing his motivation for House Concurrent Resolution 107. His bill, which places President Obama on notice that the use of a US military without permission of Congress is an impeachable high crime. Putting Obama on notice arose from an exchange between Senator Jeff Sessions and Defense Secretary Leon Panetta at a Senate Armed Services Committee hearing on the Defense NDAA budget for 2013, which was held on the 7th of March.
Now, some sort of legal basis. We worried about international legal basis, but nobody worried about the fundamental constitutional legal basis that this Congress has over war. We were not asked, stunningly, in direct violation of the War Powers Act, whether or not you believe its Constitution. It certainly didn't comply with it. We spent our time worrying about the UN, the Arab League, NATO, and too little time, in my opinion, worrying about the elected representatives of the United States. Do you think that you can act without Congress and initiate a no-fly zone in Syria without congressional approval?
You know, again, our goal would be to seek international permission, and we would come to the Congress and inform you and determine how best to approach this, whether or not we would want to get permission from the Congress. I think those are issues we would have to discuss as we decide what to do here.
Well, I'm almost breathless about that, because what I heard you say is we're going to seek international approval, and then we'll come and tell the Congress what we might do, and we might seek congressional approval.
No, well,
Commenting on his bill, Jones said, "The issue of presidents taking this country to war without congressional approval is one that I have long been concerned about. Just last week, President Obama's Secretary of Defense, Leon Panetta, told the United States Senate that he only needed to seek international approval prior to initiating yet another war, this time in Syria. Congress would merely need to be informed. This action would clearly be a violation of Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. I recently took President Obama to court over this issue, as I did earlier with President Clinton. Enough is enough. It is time this country upholds the Constitution and the principles upon which this country was founded." Meanwhile, in Syria, President Assad has told Kofi Annan that there will be no negotiations so long as terrorist groups remain in Syria. The Syrian authorities have proof of foreign special forces operating against the Syrian government. According to sources sympathetic to the Assad regime, they alleged that special forces belonging to France, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Qatar and Jordan have been active inside Syria, with some having been captured. According to Israeli intelligence outfit Debka File, British special forces have also been on the ground, directing rebel fighters in an effort to repeat the Libyan operation. The reports of President Assad's refusal to negotiate are not reflected in the UN press release, however, which state that Kofi Annan had received a positive response from President Assad, but he is seeking answers to some outstanding questions. The UK column has warned for many years that British military capability is to be deliberately undermined and run down so as to force the United Kingdom into interdependency with Europe in order to provide realistic and capable defence. Key to this policy is the weakening and ultimately the removal of Britain's independent nuclear deterrent, which is delivered by the Royal Navy's nuclear Vanguard-class ballistic missile submarines. Armed with 16 Trident ballistic missiles, which can each carry multiple warheads, these submarines are based at Faslane on the west coast of Scotland. Faslane provides a strategic and protected base for the nuclear deterrent submarine fleet, since it gives the boats easy access to deep water in the Atlantic, as well as a secure and defendable operating and maintenance base. Loss of the base and its strategic capability for nuclear submarine operations would significantly undermine the overall UK nuclear capability, a fact that Cameron is hiding from the British public. Normally reliable sources maintain that Prime Minister Cameron is forging an agreement with Alex Salmond that in the event that Scotland leaves the United Kingdom, the Faslane nuclear base will remain in place as a sovereign base area. Effectively, this means the base area will be sovereign English territory within Scotland. European sources have previously indicated that Britain is to be stripped of nuclear weapons, leaving European intercontinental nuclear defence capability in the hands of the French. Many people consider that David Cameron is a devious and untrustworthy politician, particularly where our national defence is concerned. Happy for British troops to die in unlawful wars like Iraq and Afghanistan, Cameron has consistently cut defence spending and capability behind their backs, without any dialogue within Parliament. The UK column revealed in earlier 2011 that Cameron's 50-year defence pact with the French was hatched behind closed doors with the Franco-British Council, a charity supposedly set up to foster good relations between Britain and France. Surprisingly for the British public, Franco-British defence cooperation was discussed in secret meetings co-chaired by Baroness Taylor, former UK Minister for Defence Equipment, and Xavier Pintat, Senator of the French Defence Committee. No minutes were produced for the meetings held within the Franco-British Council in Paris. It is also significant that the secret talks were ahead of the UK Strategic Defence Review, which slashed Britain's defence capabilities, and were also ahead of Cameron's 50-year defence treaty. Under the treaty, Britain is currently reduced to sharing French aircraft carriers, since Royal Navy carriers have been scrapped by the Conservative government. Joint submarine operations, meanwhile, have resulted in an underwater collision between the ballistic nuclear submarines HMS Vanguard and Le Triomphe in 2009. No explanation of this dangerous collision has ever been given to the British public. Our defence team predict that unless the treason of Cameron in destroying our armed forces is rapidly checked, British defence capability will be so weakened in the next 5 years that we will be unable to defend this country. Concerned military sources report that French penetration of UK military command, control and communications is already causing dangerous disruption to operations at strategic and local level. Meanwhile, the Royal Navy is making highly trained non-commissioned officers redundant, and the army is being cut to levels described as untenable in the event of European military threats to Britain. Economics now. Eurozone finance ministers have approved the latest €130 billion bailout package following last week's so-called successful debt swap. It is clear from the small print that Greece is to be tortured to death as they implement the austerity that goes along with it. The Greek economy is now in freefall, with unemployment benefits cut by 25% following last month's 22% cut in the minimum wage. Reuters has said they have received a European Commission report which demands that Greece cuts its budget even more than previously agreed, by a further €10 billion. The Commission report projects that this will make further cuts to health and welfare and more job losses in the public sector. Statistics from various sources demonstrate that Greece's industry and manufacturing fell by a further 5 or 6% in January, with even electricity generation affected. Greece's GDP collapsed by 7.5% in the fourth quarter of 2011, and unemployment has risen to 21%, with 40% of 15 to 30-year-olds out of work. Unsurprisingly, there has been a 10% increase in crime against property. While Greece's real economy and living standards collapse, there is no solution to be found on the financial markets. The new bonds, which were issued as a result of last week's swap, are selling for next to nothing on the secondary bond market. Moody's reported on the 12th of March that the risk of a Greek default is still extremely high, even following the debt swap. They said it is extremely unlikely that Greek debt will fall below 120% of GDP by 2020. So, if no solutions are to be found in Greece's real economy or the financial markets, what is Greece to do? A hint seems to be coming from Belgian investigative website Trends, which yesterday led with allegations being made by prominent economics writer Johan van Overtveld, director of Belgian economics think tank VKW Metana. The allegations centre on evidence from an employee of the Bank of Greece, Greece's central bank. The employee claims that the bank has begun printing its own euros in order to keep the main Greek retail banks afloat. By any standard, this is simple counterfeiting. It should be clear that when a blind eye is being turned to this kind of desperate criminal act, then there is no way back for Greece, or for the euro, or for the global financial system. The whole lot needs to be placed in administration now, before the pain which Greeks are suffering hits us all tenfold. The Fitch credit rating agency has joined Moody's in warning that the UK's AAA rating is on negative outlook. The warning comes as George Osborne is finalising the budget which he will deliver next Wednesday. In theory, or at least if anyone on the markets really cared what the rating agencies say anymore, it could cost Britain more to borrow money on the markets if it does lose its AAA rating. In practice, this is really a warning from the financial establishment to George Osborne not to do anything in this budget which would put at risk the austerity measures that Britain's real bosses in the City of London require the government to implement. Kenneth Clarke has launched an unprecedented attack on the Royal British Legion yesterday over its opposition to Clarke's plans for secret courts. As is normal when politicians get caught with their pants down, Clarke rolled out the conspiracy theory rebuttal and accused the Legion of getting carried away. Clarke said, I'm sorry the British Legion appears to be getting carried away with another campaign, this time based on the conspiracy theories that have been put out by Secret Justice. The fact is, military families, like everybody else, do understand that military intelligence officers, for example, can't always give full evidence in open hearings about all their activities. This is a similar argument used to justify the family courts, that proceedings need to be held in secret because those concerned need to have their identities protected. In the family courts, perjury, testimony from unqualified experts, false documentation and witness coaching are not uncommon. Where court proceedings are held in secret, corruption is endemic. Perhaps this time Kenneth Clarke was reminded that it is not sufficient for justice to be done, it must be seen to be done. Following the recent news coverage from the mainstream media regarding the privatisation of the police force, the UK column can reveal that it is not only our constabularies and NHS that will be privatised under the Con-Dem alliance, but also the government itself. Whilst the privatisation of our services is being heralded as the only way to prevent this country from falling into disarray, it must be pointed out that the privatisation of our services will suffocate the last gasps of our sovereignty. For when everything becomes private, we the people shall have no say at all in how our government will operate. Whilst the news regarding the police has just been announced, this station reported that the privatisation of police had in fact started in 2010. Not wishing to break tradition, the government has been very quietly privatising positions in local government as well. Last year, the government announced that it was scrapping an informal code, or two-tier system as it was also known, which ensured equality of pay in the workplace where both private and public were in operation. Under new proposals, private companies can set whatever pay levels they wish, which, as the government pushes to privatise more and more civil posts, will only see the reduction of wages and conditions in the workplace. If we are in any doubt that the Con-Dems are trying to privatise our services, we have only to turn to Francis Maude, Paymaster General, who, at the time of the eradication of the two-tier system, said quite clearly, "We are trying to encourage new entrants into the outsourced market," which, in plain English, simply means that the government is actively encouraging the privatisation of our services. Last year, more than 1,100 jobs were outsourced from central government to the private sector, which is reportedly worth approximately $80 billion per year. Whilst local governments are actively seeking private contracts, viewers will be outraged to learn that high-ranking officials in local government are using this desire to go private to avoid paying the correct level of tax. A number of our servants are creating private companies of their own, who are then used by local governments to employ the director of these companies, i.e. themselves, to act as consultants instead of being made employees, subject to PAYE. Such positions command large salaries that run into the hundreds of thousands of pounds, which would normally put them into the 50% tax bracket. However, through this loophole, the individual draws dividends from their company and so only have to pay 21% corporation tax, saving an extra 29% of their salary. Those councillors that have taken advantage of this loophole in the past include Mike Forrester of Bournemouth, Carl Wellham of Hackney, Ed Lester of the Student Loans Company, Andrew Travers of Barnet, and Dave Burbage of the Isle of Wight, as well as Hammersmith and Fulham Council, who face the prospect of explaining to Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs why it regularly employs expensive consultants indirectly rather than as employees. It is unclear what action, if any, has been taken by the government to address this situation, which is leaving the public purse with less than it should have, other than George Osborne's assurances that the loophole will be closed at some point. While it has long been reported that Nicolas Sarkozy was fully complicit in the decision by David Cameron and Barack Obama to kill Muammar Gaddafi, French investigative website Mediaport now claims that its journalist, Fabrice Arfi, has seen a confidential note suggesting that Gaddafi contributed up to €50 million to Sarkozy's 2007 presidential election fund. Similar allegations emerged a year ago when Gaddafi's son, Saif al-Islam, claimed that Libya had helped to finance Sarkozy's campaign and demanded that the French president should return the money in sight of the fact that he was bombing his erstwhile campaign contributors. Mediaport's Fabrice Arfi has reported that the documents are contained in the legal dossier of the affair, currently under investigation by a judge. "We knew these documents existed, but it is the first time we have had the details of what was in them," he said, "and there are lots of details including dates, places and amounts." Mediapart claims that 50 million euros referred to the note was laundered through bank accounts in Panama and Switzerland. The Swiss account, they say, was opened in the name of the sister of Jean-Francois Copé, the leader of Sarkozy's ruling UMP party and the president's right-hand man. The money was then allegedly distributed through an arms dealer called Zaid Takleddine, who acted as a middleman between Arab despots and French politicians. When previously asked about Saif al-Islam's claims, a spokeswoman for Elysée Palace told Le Monde, "We deny it quite evidently." Health enthusiasts will be happy to hear that scientists working on ways to patent our food have been able to engineer another Frankenstein's monster in the form of wheat that shows a resistance to salt in oil. This is following the media push to convince the public that the country is about to suffer a drought which will affect the UK nationwide, which could be used to encourage the use of the modified wheat. GM enthusiasts claim that there is not enough land for farmers to grow their wheat, a staple food for most of the world, due to salinisation. Whilst viewers will have their own opinion as to why the salt content in our soil is increasing, GM scientists claim that by introducing NAX2, a gene locus in Triticum monococcum, into a commercial durum wheat, they can grow wheat in salt-saturated soils. No doubt this GM wheat will be patented, locking farmers into commercial contracts that benefit the likes of Syngenta and Dow, and not the human beings that will be eating this potentially dangerous product. Despite creating superbugs and weeds that are resistant to pesticides, such as the disastrous chemical agent Roundup created by none other than Monsanto, or creating known illnesses in humans such as organ disruption, particularly in the liver and kidneys, as well as a whole host of understudied side effects, the UK government has given the go-ahead for Frankenstein scientists to grow untested GM wheat in the UK. The consent for trial was granted by DEFRA in September 2011, allowing for planting to commence on the 1st of March this year. The GM wheat will be grown in an open-air field at Rothamsted Research Facility in Hertfordshire. Media coverage has been very quiet, no doubt to prevent the outrage of local farmers whose natural wheat crops are now threatened by cross-pollination of the open-air GM trials. Testing also continues at the University of Leeds, testing pest-resistant potatoes, and John Innes Centre in Norwich, examining blight resistance. And finally, a reminder that the new issue of the UK column newspaper is out now. The front page article describes how, on the 29th of April 1991, a meeting was held between Lord Fraser, Scotland's Lord Advocate, Lord Roger, the Solicitor General, Duncan Lowe, the Crown Agent, Alfred Vernet, Deputy Crown Agent, and persons unknown, to discuss a report written by Eilish McPhillomey, now Dame Eilish Angelini, that sought to establish a rationale for and the extent to which the protections offered by common law could be circumvented and statute law ignored. I'm Massey, and this has been the UK Column News. Thank you for watching.